About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not especially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course, anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Brueghel's Icarus, for example, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him, it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs, disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. Oh, yes. So taking a comfortable seat and just beginning with relaxing the shoulders and relaxing the hands on your lap. That pose of receptivity and openness. Just shaking off whatever you brought with you this morning into the room. And then feeling your awareness right here at the center of your forehead. And by that, I mean placing your attention there, making that the focal point of your concentration, which is the subject of today's meditation. And from that focal point, imagine a pin and everything else, the muscles of your face, the neck, the shoulders, the length of the body, everything else dangles as if it were a cloth to which that pin is attached. And from there, you just breathe in to the count of 4 with a pause at the top, and then release to the count of 5. Your focus fixed on that pin, you're practicing selective concentration. You're homing in on one point of attention. And at the same time, because we're capable of doing these two things at the same time, We're stepping way back and we're seating ourselves behind the mind. And we're watching it all just go by. Our thoughts flying by like murmurations of starlings. Our emotions like clouds in that same sky. The thoughts pass. This is active concentration. It's just watching things as they pass, not holding on to anything. Just being firm in your seat, like a mountain with travelers spiraling upwards around it. And as you're breathing in, you begin to feel the connection between the heart and the mind, as if they're one organ. As if they're a flute that can't be played without both ends. And now we're in it. You feel the walls widen, the ceiling heightening. Just giving space to whatever worries, whatever ruminations you brought into the room with you, and letting those birds pass. Musée de Beaux Arts. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who do not specially want it to happen. Skating on a pond at the edge of the wood, they never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course, anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Brueghel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him, it was not an important failure. The sun shone, as it had to, on the white legs, disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. So for those of you who don't know, this is a poem that is reflecting on this painting, Landscape with the Fall of Icarus by Breughel the Elder, which was painted, it said, in 1560. And there are many ways of understanding this painting. This poem focuses on one of them, but there are many ways. One is that nobody sees what's happening here. If you look over here in the right bottom corner of the painting, you'll see these two legs, which are representing Icarus having fallen out of the sky. And all we get are these little legs that are dangling in the water. Nobody sees it, and the figure in the center is probably the best one to exemplify this. They're looking completely the opposite way. It's this man with a stick looking up into the sky in the opposite direction. The other reading of this painting is that they see but they ignore, which you could say is happening to the plowman here. The plowman has work to do and is completely helpless to do anything to affect the outcome of this fall from the sky. So the plowman is going on with his work. The third reading is that they see, but they have no choice to let it go. So this ship, if you notice over here to the right, is passing right by Icarus. Icarus, they must have seen the fall, yet the wind is in the sails and it's pushing the ship onward. So they have no chance to stop and help Icarus. And I would say there's a fourth reading too, which is a metaphorical reading for this painting, which I'll get to in the second half of the meditation. And it has to do with not being distracted by disasters that are happening in our periphery at work or in life, and staying focused on our real service to others. But that's the painting. And, there's a historical reading of this poem, which I think is really important to note. It was written in December 1938, as the little epigraph shows us. And 8 months later, Auden would write an even more famous poem called September 1st, 1939, about Hitler's occupation of Poland, which was the beginning, ultimately, of World War II. This poem was written in December of 1938, and only a month later, in January of 39, Auden would leave England for America. But it's a response to something that happened in September of 38, which was the UK Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain's agreement with Hitler called the Munich Pact, where he allowed the annexing of Czechoslovakia. And Chamberlain said something really famous in September of 38. He said, "How incredible it is that we should be digging trenches and trying on gas masks here because of a quarrel in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing." He came back to the UK saying that there would be peace in our time. Auden is responding to that in Icarus, because he's saying how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. And it seems to be a direct comment on Chamberlain. Of course, this peace in our time did not last very long. Britain entered the war 2 days after Hitler occupied Poland on September 3rd, 1939. But it's a remarkable poem in a sense because it's fixed in history, and yet it doesn't mention the event that it's referring to. So it's really about this bystander apathy that occurred at that moment in England and would soon change. But there's a spiritual reading of this poem too, which I think is ultimately the important one that transcends this historical moment. And it's really saying, this is life. This is the source of our suffering. About suffering, the old masters were never wrong. Suffering comes down to this, that no matter how good you have it, there's always somebody in the side view who is struggling. And to be human is to know this, that there is old age and there's sickness and death. Buddha leaves his princedom to go out searching for truth because he understands that he can have it great in the palace, but it's torture to know that outside of those walls there are people struggling. So the poem now, all of these years later, is challenging us with this question: how can the plowman really help? What can the plowman really do up there on the land? How can we save every Icarus? And with the ship has a job to do and shipments to deliver, and the seas are rough already, and the winds are in its sails. I think of that line from Leonard Cohen: I can't keep track of each fallen robin. Or it's like that moment in Melville at the end of Bartleby the Scrivener when the lawyer throws up his hands, if you know that story, and says, "Ah, Bartleby, ah, humanity." How far are we being asked to go to help the multitudes who are suffering? And how do we live in the world knowing that we can't help everybody? There are small gods falling out of the sky all around us all the time. So the poem teaches us nothing about this. It simply says, this is the way it is. And the old masters understood this problem too. But what I love about it is that just by saying that, it makes us a little less ignorant. It asks us to ignore a little less. I read this poem and I go out into the world and I just remember that I don't know what happened to the mother of the woman who takes my order at the cafe. I don't know about the fresh diagnosis for the person who's cold calling me on my cell phone and who I might otherwise cut off quickly. And I don't know about the sick child of the bank assistant who is distracted, even though today my card was stolen. So the old master, as Auden is saying, we're very deft at capturing this aspect of our condition, that nothing is ever going just right for everybody. That right now, even in this room among us, there is somebody who is struggling just to hold it together. And they're doing a great job of it because we can hardly see that it's happening. Here's the poem one more time. Musée de Beaux Arts. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there must always be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course. Anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life, and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. It's taking a comfortable seat. Getting back into that position of fixed attention, of selective concentration, where you feel that pin right here at the center of your forehead. and letting everything fall like cloth from that point. The eighth step in the Noble Eightfold Path, the last step, is right concentration, or right samadhi, which is the word often used for concentration in our practice. Breathing into the count of 4. The pause at the top. Breathing out to the count of 5. We might dedicate our practice today to that person in the room, unseen to us, who's doing their best to hold it together. That's an act of selective concentration. In fact, samadhi itself is sometimes translated as gathering. Samadhi itself is a holding together. And that's why I love Brueghel's painting. As being metaphorical for this gathering up of all the aggregates into a focus. So we're not easily distracted by sensational things that are falling all around us in the periphery. All of these Icari that are falling out of the sky like panicked colleagues who draw us into their drama, or sayers of doom. Or false prophets, strange presidential tweets. These are Icari that are kicking in the water all around us. Or the things we run to, like intoxicants and screens. Or our own doubts. Our fears and aversions and our own false hopes. These are all distractions from the plowing and the sailing. So let's practice this distinction between active concentration and selective concentration. Breathing in, I know this is an illusory world. It's all a dream. Breathing out, I choose this world to help relieve the suffering of others. In active concentration, we're just watching things go by, watching the world pass by us. It's a beautiful movie. It's a dream. Our thoughts are secretions of the brain. In selective concentration, we home in. We refuse to be distracted. I choose this world to help relieve the suffering of others. Even Auden's poem does it. It begins with general statements about suffering, how the world mostly doesn't see from the periphery what's really happening. And then it homes in on Icarus and all of the aspects of the painting. It focuses completely in the second half on this one example. And for me, I just think of that ship as my guide to right samadhi, right concentration. The wind is already in its sails. It has somewhere to get to, and it sails calmly on amidst all of the distractions in the landscape. So many ways to see this unforgettable poem, Musée de Beaux Arts. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course, anyhow in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. Thank you, everyone.